Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to In the Zone. Rich Sutter, Pete Coles. We're off and ready to roll in the hoop world today, folks. There is a lot going on, and we are going to go right off the get and jump into feed 'em fish in the NBA, folks. A lot going on in the National Basketball Association, and we are ready to jump off. We're off with a congratulations to Kevin Durant. He is the 10th, and this is pretty big. He's the 10th player in NBA history to reach 28,000 points.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This is the company that he's in. Number 1, LeBron. Number 2, Kareem. Number 3, Karl Malone. Number 4, Kobe Bryant. Number 5, Michael Jordan. Number 6, Dirk Nowitzki. Number 7, Wilt Chamberlain. Number 8, Shaq. Number 9, Carmelo Anthony, and now number 10, the great Kevin Durant. Congratulations to Kevin Durant, to the Phoenix Suns, to the other organizations that Kevin has played for. He's been a great NBA consummate pro, and that's rarefied air right there, my friend. Good job. Okay, so we also had this stat that came up that I enjoyed also in the NBA, is the most players with 30 points and 10 assist games. So that's pretty big, having 30 points and 10 assists in a game. And I was really interested to look at some of the names. Number 1 is Oscar Robertson, the great Oscar Robertson. He averaged a triple-double for an entire NBA season, folks. And we now have Oscar in at 227 times. He had 30 points and 10 assists.
227?
227 times. And listen to this. In 1,040 games played.
Wow.
So that's almost in 20% of his games. That shows people rarely talk about Oscar Robertson as one of the greats. And I was around young enough to watch him. He was sensational. Okay, so James Harden. He comes in at 101 in the number 2 spot. 30 points, 10 assists. We've been critical of Mr. Harden. And some of it is because he's very, very ball controlling. And some of this, but these are good numbers. 30 and 10, and not many times good numbers.
We've never been critical that he's a talented player, just he's a complex individual.
He's mercurial.
Yeah.
He's mercurial, like a lot of these players. A lot of these players. You know, you get paid to score. You get paid by, your abilities. You get paid by how much, the points go in the basket. So I understand that piece of it too. LeBron, 98, and LeBron has over 1,400 games. Russell Westbrook in at 84. Thought that was pretty interesting. The great Tiny Archibald, 76 games at 5'9", 5'10". He was the last player, and maybe the only player in NBA history to lead the league in scoring and assists. That was a great accomplishment. Tiny Archibald, and I swear to you, he's 5'9". Trae Young in at 75. Archibald, the interesting part, did it in 876 games as well. All right, so the NBA is off to their greatest scoring season of all time. That's what you have when defense collapses and you have good marketing people. The defense has absolutely collapsed. 4 players have 70 points in like the last week. Bunch of guys are in the 60s, and the NBA is up clapping like seals going, we're so excited about this. We're so excited about this. They come out with a statement that says, we're not alarmed. We're not alarmed by the rash of scoring that's just occurred. Now, they should talk about all of the scoring that's occurred. They should also talk about the fact that they have 1, maybe 2 teams that hold a team under 110 points per game. And maybe just come out and play it straight with people. Okay? You don't want people to stop anybody. You want your stars to have freeway to the basket. You've created that with illegal defense. You've created that with the three-point shot spreading out the floor bigger and bigger. You've created all of that. So when you say you're not alarmed, I'm not surprised, because you can't be alarmed when you started the fire. All right. We're going to keep moving. LeBron, a pretty good accomplishment for LeBron James. He is the first player in NBA history to be in an All-Star game 20 times.
Wow.
To be elected to an All-Star game 20 times. That's huge. Huge. Now, we had another firing. The cannons of the NBA are going off. Boom, boom, boom. You shake your head when you're, the number 2 team in the league. You shake your head when, you're right there. And I swear to you, Joe Mazzulla, he better be watching his back because people are taking shots at him all over the place. And they're the number one team in the entire NBA right now, and they're killing the coach. So it's rough up there. It's rough at the top. But the Wizards went ahead and fired Wes Unseld Jr. Wes Unseld, the dad, one of the great. They had a different name back then, but he was one of the great in the organization history, one of the great rebounders in the game. But they went ahead, and after 40 plus games, the Wizards have a terrible roster. Whoever coaches that team right now does not matter. It doesn't matter. You're terrible. You're going to be terrible. And when the season ends, they're going to go, you had a terrible season. If you bring back Red Auerbach and assist him with Holtzman and Kevin Loughery, you're still going to lose. All right. Julius Randle, shoulder separation, out for the Knicks. We said on our Facebook page, we're pretty sure that it did not happen on defense.
Safe bet.
Safe bet. The 76ers have lost Embiid, and a lot of people now are starting to talk about the rule the NBA implemented about the 65 games and your ability to win the MVP if you are out for more than 65 games. Mr. Embiid is the former MVP, and right now might get knocked out of consideration because he won't have enough games. He'll certainly have the numbers to be considered, but injury will have held him out of games. And again, I wanted to go back to this rule a little bit because it's what happens when you get corporate. You make things that sound okay, might be lawyerly and might be legal, but you also don't have a very good feel for basketball, and 65 games, are whatever the threshold they decided on. If the person's legitimately hurt 2 or 3 times in the season with an ankle sprain, it happens. It happened to me a lot of times when I played. Sometimes you can go, and sometimes you just cannot. And if there's other extremity issues, a foot, a hand, those things are pretty necessary for a basketball player. I just think that the league came in and wanted to react to load management. And instead of telling teams we're going to fine you heavily for load management, they went ahead and they concocted this rule, and I'm not sure it's a good one. All right, who had the best month last month, Pete, in the NBA? It was the Knicks, the Cavaliers, and the Clippers. Interesting. They're all on the rise. They're all in our 15, our Super 15, but they're all on the rise. And the Knicks had a very, very good month. Cavaliers doing a great job out there. They're one of the surprise teams of the year. And the Clippers are hot. The Clippers are hot. This is what we alluded to. There were 10 players in NBA history with 70 points plus in like the last 30 years. And there's been 4 in the last 400 days. Shifting gears to the NCAA fish. A couple of really, really good buzzer beaters out there, Pete. A lot of really good games. We're excited to tell the Husky fans that they'll hold in at number 1 in our power rating. We talked last week about crashing the court, blasting the court after a victory. You beat the number 1 team and you rush the court and everything like that. We looked at Caitlin Clark getting run into.
Yep.
Thank God not seriously injured, but we did talk about that a little bit. But we did allude to a team getting fined, and it was South Carolina. The Gamecocks of South Carolina got fined $100,000 for running on. And so we'll see. Online betting opens in North Carolina right before the ACC tournament, folks. We're excited about that. About 3 days before the ACC tournament, they're going to go online live in North Carolina. Let's hold on to our hats for that one,
And
folks.
they're not going to make any money at all.
No. A lot of people are going to make money on this. One of the things that I asked somebody the other day was when we talk about name, image, and likeness, and I have a phone in my hand way, way too much of the day, have a computer on some of the day, I have a television on in my room a good part of the day, where are all the images and likenesses? Where are the names? I see Shaquille O'Neal in every commercial that's on my TV. He's a billionaire.
Yep.
Kevin Hart is in every commercial that goes on. If we're really having deals with these young people, don't you think we would see that? Don't you would see the name, image, and likeness being used somewhere? I haven't seen any one of their names being used anywhere in any kind of commercial aspect for which I believe this thing was designed for.
And they're getting paid handsomely for.
Oh, Big time. And we'll keep track of that for you. We'll let you know when we find somebody. All right.
Let's put the call out to the hinterlands.
No doubt. You got some teams with some ranked wins here. All right. And we're going to talk about that because when you're putting your brackets together, every year you sit there and your bracket collapses. Mine does too, but mine does sometimes for other reasons. But your bracket collapses because there's a lot of really good teams out there that don't get the publicity that the other teams do. And as much as you can figure out these algorithms, you go ahead and try and figure it out. But I don't know how Michigan State with 8 losses belongs in anybody's top 25. I just don't understand that. And Tom Izzo, we'll talk about him in a little bit. Great coach and all that other stuff. He'd probably tell you they don't belong in there. But here's some teams with some ranked wins, and that's going to be important. Purdue is hanging on, and we're going to shed some light on this in a minute. Chris Collins was ejected from the Northwestern Purdue game the other night. We're going to talk about that in a second. But Purdue's 5-0. Memphis was 4-0 and doing good, but they've just hit a slide recently, losing to some teams that aren't ranked. Marquette's got a 4-1 record against ranked teams. The Big East is holding up pretty good there. UConn's doing okay. They're 4-1. Carolina 4-2, although they dumped the game to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech seems to be everybody's nemesis this year in the ACC. But you got Arizona with 3-2. Houston's doing well as well. I watched them the other night, and I was a little bit cautious about them because I don't think they score the ball that well. I don't think they have that offensive juggernaut. But this team just was on the road playing against Texas, and they just kept taking punches. Texas kept hitting shots. They were on the road, and their defense was good, and Texas was hitting some bombs. And they just shook it off, kept coming, tough like a junkyard dog, and they just scrapped out a victory that was just unbelievable to watch. Kelvin Sampson's one of my favorite guys in the business right now. Dayton took a tough loss to Richmond. I think that'll knock them out of a lot of people's top 25. It did with us. Richmond's the team in the A-10 right now. And I think what a lot of people might be hoping for in the A-10 is that Richmond can hold court or Dayton can hold court and that Richmond can get an at-large bid. I think it's probably unlikely that Richmond gets an at-large bid, although I think it might be likely that Dayton could. So
Richmond gets the A-10 title and then Dayton sneaks in?
I think the A-10 might be surreptitiously hoping for a little bit of that. And that's what you're going to see happen with some of these mid-majors with their trying to get multiple bids in their stuff. It's going to be hard for them. It's going to be difficult for the A-10 to draw multiple bids this year. They have 2 teams right now out of all the teams in their conference that have any chance at it, unless, of course, somebody would come out and win the conference tournament, and then that would eliminate one of the 2 teams that we're talking about right now. Yeah. So they basically have 2 teams the entire time in consideration. It's interesting. Interesting when you look at it that way. All right, so Coach Collins, former Duke guard, and his dad was an NBA player and coached the Chicago Bulls for a while. He goes into Purdue the other night, and his team plays great basketball. Really, really good basketball. He winds up getting ejected with about 1.5 seconds in the game, and really, really it gets emotional on the sidelines with the officiating. Okay, and part of the reason for that was they were 46-8 in free throw disparity in a Big Ten game. That has not happened in a Big Ten game in 25 years. So you're on the road, you're getting cooked, and all of a sudden the fans are on, everybody else is on, and you have to face 46-8, and your team still hangs in there. It's what we were talking about before, Pyrrhic victories, but man, that's just unbelievable. That hasn't happened in the Big Ten in 25 years, that type of disparity. And anybody that's in the business know that there's a little bit of a lean towards trying to keep things even, especially when people can look up at the scoreboard and go, hey, it's 9-1. Coaches love doing that. Hey, we're down 8-1 on the fouls, you know. But here's the thing also. You had to go back the entire year to find a game with that much dispute in the free throws, and it was the game in which Jeff Jones recently had a health issue this year and stepped out of the sidelines, but he got thrown out of the game and ejected from the game, and the disparity there was 51-9.
Wow. That's crazy.
And the thing is there is zero accountability, because I looked at the television the day Jeff Jones got thrown out of the game, and I absolutely laughed in my living room. I won't tell you why, but when he got thrown out and I saw some of the things that I saw on that court, I laughed out loud. It wasn't really a good laugh. All right, let's talk about Tom Izzo. On his birthday, he eclipses. This guy knows how to have a good birthday. 700 victories. 700. That's an amazing accomplishment. An amazing accomplishment. Really, really something tight. Really, really something tight. I don't know what else we got here. We're going to go with the Huskies holding. We got, a little bit of, excuse me, got a little bit of something going on with the rest of it, because anywhere in the top 25 you go now, you have a few teams like, if you look at our top three, you have Houston, Purdue, and UConn, most universally, and you can move that around, move those chess pieces around the board any way you want generally. But generally, everybody has that. Then you look at what's just been going on lately. North Carolina takes a dump at Georgia Tech. Kentucky loses at Texas A&M. There's just a lot of games out there where people are going in and just getting clipped. And so if you don't get clipped right now, you gain buoyancy. But getting clipped drags you down. Being able to maintain what you have, like the Connecticut Huskies have been able to do, I don't see them being challenged for this number one until Valentine's Day.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, in like 2 weeks. They got a couple of games coming up that are playing very well. They're winnable games. They're against teams that aren't doing well in the conference, and UConn's playing with gasoline. So I expect they could have some tough, difficult games, but I would expect that they can hold on to this number one right up through the Valentine's Day. So now you got all these other teams, Arizona, Alabama, BYU. They started off really hot, and then got bounced and got bounced and got bounced. And so it's difficult for the algorithm, I think, to keep up with all of that. Colorado was one of the teams we had in our top five, our top 25, and now they have 6 losses, because the cannolis are over. The Cupcake City has ended. And now you can play in real teams, and it's not holding up. And so that's what we really look at in our poll. I'm not sure the algorithm gives justice to that. But I understand if you play top 50 teams, they're tough teams. But if you're supposed to be top 50, you shouldn't lose all of those games.
Right.
You should have some success there. When you lose all of them, it says you're not ready. All right, the big fella, Zach Edey. This was a little interesting because for the very first time, and I'm shocked by this, I really am. I've never seen a player with this level of credential receive this little respect, move on to the next level. And I want to say, some of the guys that have gotten drafted in the past, I mean, honestly, really, you've drafted some guys that could hardly chew gum and walk at the same time, to be very honest with you. Drafted on potential, drafted on what might be, instead of looking at guys who come into the league, the NCAA league, perform at the top of their game. And for the first time, I saw Zach Edey in a mixed mock draft for the NBA draft. His name was in there for the very first time. In 2 rounds, all of these guys that do these mock drafts, nobody has ever had him in the draft as a pick. Not even a 1, 2, 10 lottery, not even picked. Okay? This young man just eclipsed 2,000 points and 1,000 rebounds. I don't know what's going to take people to get a look at this young man, but he looks a lot like Yao Ming to me. He takes up so much space that you can't fill it. And even in the NBA, his size is going to be a factor because where Wembanyama has length, Zach Edey's done a pretty good job of trying to add some girth to his thing. And if he continues along that path, because some of these guys that grow so quickly straight up have trouble growing out a little bit. And Zach Edey has tried to put on muscle and grow, but that's not as easy as you think for people in that frame. Remember Marcus Camby. He could eat all day, twice on Sunday, and it wouldn't matter because his metabolism ran like a Swiss clock. So he wasn't going to ever put on a lot of bulk, although very, very strong. I talked about Ralph Sampson. Everybody would look at him and say he's very thin and skinny, and I saw him curl 90 pounds in each hand.
Yep.
So I think, it's about strength. Kevin Durant couldn't bench 135 pounds at the combine. He just became one of the guys that cross over into the $28,000 club. So you really it's got to be relative. But in a low post situation where you're going to get bumped, you're going to get grind, you're going to get jostled, you're going to have to put on some weight. he's done that and been able to do that. I think he's going to be a good pro. I'm not saying he needs to be the number one pick, but for crying out loud, people, not to have him on the draft board, I just think that's just crazy. I really do, And so we're gonna try and stay up with some of that stuff, but in our draft board, Zach Edey will definitely be in our draft board. All right, we're going to skip over our NBA Power 15 today. We had some technical difficulties with that. We're going to skip right over into our NBA leaders and talk about that a little bit. We can tell you the top of our board in the NBA includes the Celtics. The Timberwolves have played well and moved back into the number 2 spot. OKC stays hot, and the Bucks are doing pretty good, although they lose some games that are head scratchers. Doc Rivers or Adrian Griffin, I look at that team sometimes and I just wonder about them defensively in a really tight game sometimes. They have trouble winning close games because they don't get stops. They have trouble getting into those close games because they're trying to trade baskets. And at some point, you need to stop somebody. And right there, they have defense that's probably not, overly construed towards it. Dame Lillard is a great scorer. Giannis can do a lot of things. But, a lot of times, and maybe that could have been a little bit of the rub with Coach Griffin as well, is that, if some of these coaches are probably still talking about defense in the NBA, although nobody's listening, and so while these coaches are talking about it, it probably rubs up against their good players, and their good players start to say, hey, coach doesn't get it, and so it's a lot like you'll see some of the other pro organizations. You basically have 2 types of head coach right now. You have a head coach who gets along with the players, lets them do what they want, lets them bring out their creative talent, and basically goes unscripted. You don't have plays, you don't have defenses, you don't have schemes and different things like that to try and stop the best player. You're just out there running around unscripted. And then you'll have the other coaches that come in and they're very much controlling. They like to have their say. They like to have their plays called. They like to have everything done their way. And a lot of times in the NBA, that's not met with the greatest of ease and not met with the greatest of buying into your vision and your values. So that becomes difficult. It's tough to coach in that league. It really is. And that's why I think they put people up there that used to be players, because I think the NBA personally is looking for more, corporation-wise, is looking for more of the former that I talked about. They're looking for a little bit more of the guy who goes along and gets along.
Yeah, but if you want to watch a Sandlot game, you can go to the Sandlot.
It's
you know what I mean?
If you watch the end of these games, you're seeing it.
Right.
If you watch the end of these games, I talked about it last year at the end of the Celtics games, okay? It matters. The play calling matters. Who gets the ball in their hands at the right time with the right call, it matters. And if you watch the end of some of these games, even some of these high-level Division I games, I sit there sometimes and shake my head because of the clock management, the way that these calls go at the end, and the shot that they wind up with at the end after having a play call that, just doesn't work. And then you wind up having your guard dribble it out, shoot the ball, and sometimes it goes in. If it goes in, you take credit. If it doesn't, wow, we got the look and we didn't get the shot. Terrible, really. It's a thing where you're losing interest. People are losing interest. The NFL's losing interest. That's why Taylor Swift's going to the Super Bowl right now. They're trying to drum up interest from all the areas that they can, and people are seeing it for what it is. People are seeing it as more entertainment than sport. That's the day you die, my friends. That's the day you die.
Unless you become the WWE and you embrace the entertainment and forget the sport.
Nobody goes to WNBA games, though.
Right.
Nobody attends them. If they start to attend them better, they will. Now, college women's basketball, I'm excited about that because with Caitlin Clark and some of the other stars that they have out there, you're getting some people, they're getting some great crowds, and people are starting to have interest. In the game that Caitlin Clark's playing in next week, it's sold out, and the cheapest ticket was $230. So the interest is there. That says interest. That says revenue. That says money. But when you look at some of the programs and you talk about what we're talking about, NIL, and one of the things that I think would have to be a determination point in this whole discussion is, where is the revenue? And if there is no revenue, then you don't really make a good case for saying what business loses money and still has revenue. You don't. You lost money. It's accounting 101. So if you look at some of the programs that you have, and I'm not trying to be critical, I'm just saying from a numbers perspective, especially if you're trying to condone NIL to me rather than a stipend payment, if you want to condone NIL to me, and in some other ways we could think about it, but not the way that the context it is in now, then we have to look at revenue. I saw something where the coach from women's coach from Mississippi came out and was speaking about a lot of different issues, a lot of different things. But you might term it being a little bit critical of people for different things. But at the end of the day, someone came out and posted this fact that the Mississippi women's basketball team operates at minus $8 million. I would love to get somebody to fact check that for me to see if that's true. But we're looking at a program you're operating at minus $8 million, and we're talking about NIL money, talking about paying anybody.
Right.
I don't see how you can do that. And so those are the real discussions that I think you need to have with people. All right, just to close out the NBA, we're going to sit on a couple of the. We haven't done this in a couple of weeks. We didn't see a whole lot of change, so we didn't keep bringing it up. We'll bring it back up intermittently, and we've been watching it, and we'll see if we focus on any change. But the leading scorer in the NBA is Joel Embiid. That won't change whether he plays 65 games or not. Luka in at number 2. You got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, one of my favorite players, coming up. Giannis and Kevin Durant take it out. Durant's taken a couple of hits there, gone down a couple of points where he was close to 30. He's at 28-4 right now, but nobody has eclipsed him in the number 5 spot. In your rebounding category, you got Domantas Sabonis, Rudy Gobert, the Joker, Anthony Davis staying in there at 12-1, and you have Giannis. This is why people are talking about Giannis for MVP.
But are they doing that all on the offensive end of the ball? They're not doing it on the defensive end, right?
Those are just total rebounds.
Okay.
Generally, it's way more preponderant towards the defensive side.
Okay.
Like if you get 15 rebounds in a game, if it went 5 offensive, that's a lot. Giving up that many offensive rebounds to one player is bad. It means your rebounding is really bad. But I would say that they show up in both of those categories. But like knowing Sabonis and Gobert like I do, they're big. They just stand around the basket 12 times, and they fall into their hands more than anything.
Yep.
All right, assists, we stay with Tyrese Halliburton coming back from his injury. We wish him well. Trae Young, Luka, that's why people are talking about him. It's what we said about Giannis. You're averaging 30, and you're in the rebound category. You're averaging 30, and you're in the assist category. Those are numbers that, when you equate them out to what they help as terms of your plus minus efficiencies, those efficiencies are off the chart. Okay, so that's why we talk MVP. Joker and James Harden rising at 8.5. Who do you think's leading the league in three-pointers made?
Harden?
Nope, same guy that's been doing it forever, Steph Curry.
Steph Curry, yeah.
He's at 175, although Luka has closed a little bit at 155. There's used to be about a 25 differential there. I see it's about 20 now. He's getting a little closer, but I don't know if you can catch him. He's such a good shooter. George from the Clippers goes in third, Hardaway, and we close out with Thompson, Klay Thompson from the Warriors in the number 5 spot. During the week, I did, just for fans' notice, I did hashtag Dirty Draymond. All right.
What do you do now?
He's just dirty. He's a dirty player. And here's what I want to run across the NBA lawyer and corporate execs, okay? What happens if somebody gets seriously hurt by him and they're worth all these millions of dollars and they sue you because you knew that he kept hitting people, you knew that he kept doing this, and you did nothing to him outside of giving him some couple of days off to go to some Club Med down in the Baha Mar? Okay, you didn't do anything other than that. What happens then when the litigation turns on you? That's what I want to know from the NBA people. What happens then? Because he's going to hurt somebody. And where I come from, that type of dirty basketball is unbelievably bad. It is an infamilia to the game. Trying to hurt another player like that is absolutely goes against the pale of everything the game is supposed to stand for. And you can't tell me he's not doing it intentionally. And you can't tell me that he hasn't put people in harm's way. And after doing that 1, 2, 3, how many times? He knocked his own teammate out. Okay? How many times is the NBA going to turn their back and allow for it? And to be honest with you, to be very honest with you, he has zero star power in the NBA. He goes tomorrow, nobody knows it. He leaves tomorrow, nobody knows it. Dirty Draymond's got to go. Get him out. All right. I'm going to leave it with blocks, Pete. I don't like dirty basketball.
Yeah.
I played basketball. In my schoolyard in the Bronx, you would have cleared it out several times based on number of things that he did. You would have cleared it out. There would have been fistfights all over the place based upon what he did. All right, Wembanyama leads in blocks, and I think you might want to get used to seeing that for a little while in the NBA. He's going to be the blocks leader, I think, for a really, really long time. You got Lopez, Kessler, Holmgren, Davis throwing in there too. Davis has stayed healthy for the Lakers. So important for the Lakers for him to stay healthy. They just don't have enough. They just don't have enough. If they don't make something happen in the trade deadline stuff, they're not good. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs. They're not playing great right now. They need some help. They need some frontline help. And what they needed, what I thought would be an optimal trade, but I don't know who they would trade. They could trade D'Angelo Russell, but I don't know what the takers are for him. And I don't know what you're going to get in return. But what they really need is to kind of craft a trade where you could go two ways. Get a point guard and a big man to help out LeBron and Anthony Davis, okay? Or do what I've told you to do all along. Move LeBron James to the point and pick up two bigs. Pick up two wings to help Anthony Davis up front. A scoring wing and another big man who can rebound and help out up front. Those will settle your things right there. So I think if you did that one thing of move LeBron to the point, you'd really help your team. But I think also it would also help you in this trade situation because I think it's the 7th of February that they're going to close down the trade deadline. And we're going to have a pretty special guest on right after that, so we're excited about that. But, Pete, with the rest of our time, we're going to jump into our Super 25 with the college basketball Super 25.
Hey, just a little shout out before we jump into that.
Go ahead.
I'm going to see a Lady Husky game versus Seton Hall next Wednesday.
Wow.
They're in the big show. They're at the XL Center next Wednesday, so I got some tickets to that one going with my honey, and we're going to take a look at some UConn women's hoop. They're playing well. The ladies are playing well too.
When you look at the whole thing with Gino, it's going to be ridiculous. When you look at the whole thing with Gino, the whole career, when it all adds up, it's going to be ridiculous. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a home cooking on that game, Pete. Okay?
All right.
Pete Sanella was a longtime women's basketball coach at AIC.
Okay.
Assisted by our athletic director at Westfield State, Dick Lenfest.
No kidding.
They had some very, very good success there. Pete Sanella is now an assistant basketball coach at Seton Hall. So when you're at the game, you'll see him. He's in there with his clipboard working it and doing it, and he's a good man, Pete Sanella. And so when you head down to the game, maybe there'll be a chance you get in there a little early. Maybe you can say hello to him. All right? Good man. Good man, Pete Sanella. And Seton Hall's women's basketball is doing pretty good, too. You might see a decent game there.
Decent game, yeah.
Although I think UConn's going to be tough. Okay, so when you talk about UConn's women and you bring it up in that context, they've gotten eclipsed just a little bit, partially because women's basketball has become very, very competitive now. You have LSU, South Carolina. Some of the really big schools are doing really, really good stuff. And UConn's right there and doing all of it. But what happened was their recruiting pool got a little diluted, where Gino used to just go out and grab the top 10 players in the country. They all wanted to go to UConn. They all wanted to jump on board. They had it rolling to that degree.
Yep.
It was just going on. Now they're out there and they got to work and they got to go after it because there's all these NIL deals and all these people with money that they might not have. And I don't know how they work that at some of the schools that don't have that big base. I'm not sure what they're doing in women's basketball, but they are doing pretty good. And he caught some comments the other day that I thought were interesting. He looked at basketball now and he just shook his head and he says, I got it differently than all these other coaches on the younger levels. All of these coaches on the younger levels, you don't know what these guys are dealing with. You don't know what's going on right now. This game right now is turned upside down.
Yep.
And he alluded to some of the stuff that we talked about on the show. But I thought it was interesting. But then to say now that in our Super 25, and again, straight up for the second week in a row, the UConn Huskies men's team is the number one team in the country. And you see a lot of people that say, you have Purdue, and you have Houston. All right. My question with Houston is on the offensive side of the ball. I think UConn's much better than them offensively. And UConn plays good enough defense that they could match in a game with Houston, where Houston sometimes will allow their defense to wear you down like they did Texas the other night. And then you have Purdue, who is, they're a one-man operation, basically. I said this the other day out on Twitter or someplace. I said it. I said, here's just one piece of advice to Matt Painter and the Purdue staff, just from me, little old Rich Sutter. Give him the ball, Zach Edey the ball, every single time down the floor. He gets it. He gets it. He gets it. And until that stops, you just keep rolling in. Now, I got some really good shooters on the perimeter, but every time this man touches the ball, it's high value. Every single time he touches the ball, I would say it's double the high value of every other player on your team. Now, when you're talking about Northwestern, and they're complaining about all the foul calling, part of that is Zach Edey effect also. He's so big and so wide that you got to foul him sometimes. And if refs are calling it straight, he gets fouled an awful lot. They don't like to always call the fouls on the big guys, the refs. They look at it like, he's big enough, I think sometimes. But they do, with Edey the other day, he's just pounding it inside against Rutgers. They went in there, and I would say to them, every day, all day, twice on Sunday, bring it into Zach Edey.
Yep.
All right, so I have them in the number 2 spot. They're 20-2. They're playing great basketball. They're a very, very good team. I just look at the TV when I watch them, and it's like when you leave your keys at home and you walk out the door and you did something wrong. You just lock the door behind you when you realize I don't have my keys. That's the feeling I have with Purdue. I want to believe in them. I want to believe my keys are in my pocket. But when I get beyond that door, sometimes I don't have them. And so that's what I think with Purdue. Can a team stop Zach Edey? And if you can stop him, play good post defense on him, not easy. I don't think it's an easy task. I don't know who in the country can do that. But if you can stop him, you have a chance with them. Connecticut's got a lot of weapons. I don't know who you hone in on there to stop them. Houston is 19-2. They have offensive problems. They have this kid, Jamal Sheed. I want to put him on everybody's radar. He might be the best defensive player in the entire country. He plays basketball like Marcus Smart did when Marcus Smart was in college. Hard-nosed, tough, and he is really, really great defender and so much fun to watch. I watched him the other night. He's starting to play good on the offensive end of the court, too. I don't think you'd get a guy like that in the NBA, but, he'd probably play a long time in Europe. Could probably play a long time in Europe. But Houston is just grind. They love the grind. A lot of teams don't get into that. When it gets close and it gets this, they panic. Houston just settles down, and they just keep coming after you. And they play defense, they hit shots, and they find a way. They find a way. Wisconsin, this is our surprise team of the Super 25 right now. This is the most surprising team in all of college basketball right now. We're going to talk a little bit about hot seat at the end of this, if we get enough time, with some coaches we think that some programs. We're not going to name coaches' names, but we are going to talk about some programs where things might open. And Wisconsin, they're on this guy all the time. I don't see it. Number 4, we're putting them 16-4, and they're doing great stuff. But when you look at a number 4 team in a country that has 4 losses, you're seeing a lot of teams taking a lot of hits out there. Auburn, we're going to leave them in at 17-4. They got beat by Alabama, which is it's a high-value game. It's a rivalry game. But 17-4, SEC Conference, we're going to leave them in at number 5. The game's coming up on Saturday, I believe, Pete, Duke and North Carolina. This is about buoyancy. Carolina lost to Georgia Tech, not a great loss. They got stung at the end of the game. Really close game. Very end of it, they got stung. And then the Dukies, they beat Clemson the other night at home. You just shake your head when you see some of that stuff, but they were beneficiaries of it. 16-4, 16-4. I'm putting them back together again because it's my favorite game of the basketball season. Number 8, Iowa State. This team is tough. This team is good. This is what I'm talking about on your bracket. You got to know about these teams that are out there. The Utah States, the Iowa States, not getting a lot of coverage, not getting a lot of play. But I'll stay up late, and I'll let you know. Some of these teams are really good. Iowa State out of that conference in the Big 12. Mamma mia, that's a tough conference, and they're holding tight. A lot of people are down on Kansas. They have, a couple of losses. They're 17-4. Big 12. I got them in at 9. I think Ken Palm has them way down. Torvik has them way down. I don't know why. I don't know why. Everybody else plays cupcakes, so do they. And then everybody else loses a couple of games, so do they. They seem to be getting, them and Mississippi seem to be getting the evil algorithm eye. All right. I just came up with that one. How about that? Illinois, number 10. All right, 16-5 coming out of the Big Ten. They have Terrence Shannon, their star back. Let's see what they can do. I think they can win the Big Ten, and that'll be a team when you want to consider a possible Final Four run. Shannon's going to be a pro. He's going to be in our top picks, and that team's pretty good, doing all right. Brad Underwood coaching them, solid. You know, they got some solid stuff going. This team's been floating around. They lost early on. They got bang, bang, bang to some good competition, but still bang, bang, bang. But then they held on, and now they've come around, and they're kind of. I've always kind of liked them, but again, they're a little bit like Houston, where they're very athletic, play very strong on the defensive end under Coach Rick Barnes. But offensively, I think they struggle at times, and that's where in the NCAA tournament, if you have a struggle offensive night, you're going home. That's why you look at some teams like a Princeton that do great in the NCAA tournament because their offense is just so high octane. That can carry you. I like defense too, but you know, you got to be able to do it on both ends. All right, so Tennessee goes in at 11. Arizona hanging around, not in love with this team. They got 15-5. They have 5 losses, and 3 or 4 of them have come in the last 2 weeks. You know, they were 15-1, 14-1. They were really, really up on top of their game. Number 1 in the country in some people's polls. But then, you know, they started getting bumped and grind, and they didn't handle it well. They didn't handle it well. All right. I've got Utah State in at 13. I like this team. 19-2. The Mountain West Conference is a good conference, people. Mountain West Conference is a good people. Good people out there. Utah State. You got San Diego State. You got New Mexico. You got Utah State. You got a lot of good teams. Colorado State. Very, very good. Okay. Thursday show after a Wednesday game. A little tough on my throat. Texas Tech, 16-4 in the Big 12. We like this team. They're athletic. They're tough. They're going to get seasoned. We'll see how they go as the rest of the way goes. Right now, they're holding tough. Richard Pitino Jr., they got bumped up last week at New Mexico, got bumped up a little bit. Again, MWC, Mountain West Conference, we like that. They're 18-4. We got them in at 15. A lot of people don't even have them in. BYU, they're sliding. I know a lot of people, they're Big 12, and they've got a couple of good wins, and that's what happens. You get a couple of quality wins, you get some buoyancy. But they were 12-1, 14-2, you know, now they're 15-5, and they're sliding. They're sliding. I'm looking for teams that are rising, you know. Not a lot of it. Not a lot of rising. Marquette, 16-5, we put them back in. Big East, they're buoyancy. They held around. They got a couple of losses they shouldn't have, but they held around. Baylor, 15-5. We love them. Big 12, they're tough. They play very physical, very physical. Creighton, we put them back in. Big East, they're strong, 16-5. Trey Alexander is really, really good. They have some really good shooters in Scheinman, and they got the big kid inside who can shoot it. Kalkbrenner, I think they're going to be a team that you might want to keep an eye on in the Big East tournament. Also keep an eye on them in your bracket. Great coaching. McDermott. They also, as Pete alluded to last week, have Coach Derek Kellogg, a local favorite, former UMass coach on their staff. So that's a really good staff. I like TCU. TCU coming in here, 16-5. Someone ought to give Jamie Dixon a sedative before the game and help him to calm down. That young man is wound like a clock, but he's a good coach. He really gets a lot out of his players, and right now his program's top 20. TCU, 16-5. I will stop and say something. When you think about Bobby Knight, you think about something. There has to be a little bit something inside of you to be a really good coach that drives other people crazy. You know, it's like you don't want really your players to you want them to love you, but I don't think you want them to like you too much. Right. You know, you want them to drive them crazy a little bit, and I think that's what good coaches can do. You walk that fine line. Some of them are really, really nuts, and they go over the side and they go over the top. You know, no question about that. But the really, really good ones can walk that line. All right, Kentucky got hit up last week. We moved them down a bit. I like this team. They're talented. But as we said, you bring in the Big Z. You got 15 games left in your season. That's a chemistry issue, and you don't want to disrupt your chemistry in this game. I'm telling you. Florida Atlantic holding in at 22. They're 17-4. We've seen them live. They're a good team. We know what they did last year in the in the Final Four. So this team, you give them their respect, but they're on the fringe now. They're 22. San Diego State at 23. They got clipped a couple of times last week. I was very high on them. They got a couple of Mountain West road trips, and they got rung up, and that's what can happen. But we moved them down. I don't know why everybody's down on this guy, but Mississippi, I guess I could know why he's down on him. But, Mississippi decided to hire him, redemption, forgiveness, whatever. I don't know, what their claim is, But they went ahead and hired him. And for the sake of the players, that are there that are performing very, very well this season, what the coach did at his previous stop really shouldn't factor into if we're an algorithm and we're looking at this strictly mathematically. I don't know how Mississippi's not in everybody's top 25. They're 18-3 out of the SEC, one of the toughest conferences in the country, and they're 18-3 right now. And when we were looking at them at 12-1 and going, I don't know, they're 18-3 right now. They deserve a little credit. To see them in the 60s, on some of these algorithms, I have trouble buying into that. I'm going to go with the South Carolina Gamecocks here in the 25 spot. I want this team much higher, too. I want to get them up there higher because I think they've done well. They beat Tennessee the other night, and I think they're doing some really, really good stuff. But I want to see them. I'm going to watch them because that conference is just so brutal, and they got a couple of really, really tough road games coming up here. All right. A lot of what happens in college basketball often centers around what a lot of people refer to as hot seat, coaching carousel. Some people call it. It has a couple of different names. But basically, as we alluded to on this show, and we covered on this show, you have a number of different places where you're going to see coaching changes. And last year, when we first started this show, we took, I think it was, here's a good resource for you. I like this guy. He used to coach a guy I know pretty good. A guy named Adam Nelson. And he started a website named Hoop Dirt. And he also has one for the women's side, which is Hoop Dirt, which is with a W, Hoop Dirt. But hoopdirt.com covers a lot of the coaching changes that go on right now. And we used to call it scuttlebutt. You would hear this and hear that and the rumors and all this other stuff. And one of the things that I wanted to just talk about was, before we get into maybe 15 places where I think you might see some change. And we're not wishing harm on anybody, but this you can read this stuff pretty much anywhere. But we'll give you our insight on it and see if you have an interest in what you think's going on with your program. But just to first talk about the carousel. All right, so the carousel is what we call it, where it's like a ride, and it goes around and around and around, and people get on and people get off. You got to have a ticket to get on, and you get off when your ride is done. So we call it the carousel, and it has like a life of itself to it that takes place in between the usually, like you saw Stubblefield get clipped at DePaul. That's a little bit of an anomaly. But usually it'll happen right after the season, somewhere in between the end of the season, conference tournaments, and then the Final Four, in between the Final Four. They like to stay out of the Final Four because they want the Final Four to shine on its own. But in that frame, in that 60-day frame, we saw 60 college jobs change hands. Now, as we've talked about our friends down at Mississippi Valley State, and again, just to report on the young and winless, Mississippi State, Mississippi Valley State, and Detroit Mercy are still winless after both 20-plus games this year. So if you're looking at a place where you might see some change in coaching, you're going to look at a place like that, because that's just, it's hard, and it causes a lot of different issues that go around that. But what also happens with the carousel as well, and this is when it spins at its optimal speed. So let's say you have a job that opens up, and we're not pick any job, but we're just going to say a job that opens up in the Power 5. It's a big, big job. And so that job gets vacated. If it gets taken by a gentleman or some person from a lower level school who's done really, really well, now he moves up into that job, but then it opens up his job. And then if his job gets taken by another coach who's active and lower level, that opens up his job. and so on and so forth. So one job, especially if it's a big job, can create butterfly wings, can create dominoes that get hit all the way through, sometimes 4 or 5 different times and ways. So we'll follow that for you as well as we proceed through this. But as you get through it, and as you get to the end of the season, the one thing you can know for sure is that at least 40 of these jobs will change hands. There are 363 teams. I am, in this year, putting on my meteorological hat, and I am forecasting for a very, very light year. I don't think it's going to be the 60 that we saw just recently. What happened with the 60 was COVID, because some of the people that would have normally gotten fired during that COVID year didn't play, had a bit of a bye year, so much other stuff going on.
Held in abeyance.
And why do it now type stuff. So that cut down on that dramatically, but that added to the next year, which then they said, okay, we're now back up, we're ready to go, and the machine is alive and eating people. And so now you're into a swing where you get 60. I think 40 would be a lot this year, but hey, who knows? Because if one opens, here's what stops the carousel from spinning. A retread. A guy who's been fired more times than a Revolutionary War cannon, and he gets another shot. Because that doesn't open up another job. That doesn't open up any other job.
Somebody coming out of the booth.
John Wooden is still alive, and UCLA fires their coach and says, we're bringing back John Wooden. The great John Wooden would go under carousel terminology as a retread. Somebody who's been in it, somebody who's been out of it, but now comes back in and does not vacate another job, does not keep the carousel spinning, does not keep all the information that pumps around about who is the new group of guys they're talking to, who are the new young hot coaches, who are the new young Chris Caputos of the world who are going to get that job and move up and finally get a head coaching job and get their chance to lead their program.
Keep the news cycle spinning.
It is, and that's what it is. It's a cycle. We call it the carousel, but it's just as easily a cycle. All right, so we're going to give you a couple of places that you might want to keep your eye on. All right, we've advocated on this show for Fairfield to lift the interim tag from Chris Casey. I think it'd be good. I think if they did it after the season, that's fine. But if you're asking us, give me the 5 names of the people that you have on your short list, and then we'll discuss that. And then tell me that all those names are better than Chris Casey's name. And I think you'll be hard-pressed to do that. I think Chris Casey's a good man. They should lift the tag. All right. So what happens also is a lot of the contracts are long for some of these coaches, like 2027 back in 20. They have 7 years on their contract. So some of them are totally insulated for years. Couldn't happen. But what happens also is sometimes they get off to such a bad start that even after 1 or 2 years, the school says, let's make a change. All right? So let's go through a couple of places that I think you might see some change. And I'll tell you whether I think they should or they shouldn't right now. Louisville, vaunted program. They're 6-15, they're 1-9, and they're DFL. DFL is dead freaking last. Doesn't really stand for freaking, but I don't want to tell you what the other part stands for.
Gotcha.
Okay? West Virginia, he's on an interim. They're 8-13. They're 3-5. You get a chance to distinguish yourself as the interim for sure, but you also get a chance to go up in flames. I'm not sure which way West Virginia is going to lean on this. It's a Big 12 job. They'll get some really big names. They'll have 250 names different than the guy who's coaching the team right now. That's what I think makes it difficult for him. Travis Ford has done a great job at UMass. He's struggling a little bit at St. Louis right now. The St. Louis program have been up. Now they're struggling a little bit. They're DFL in the Atlantic 10. No, and if you have DFL next to your name, you're in trouble. Any Division I coach with a DFL next to his name. Now, we're still not out of the season. But right now, the way things are turning, 8-13, 1-7, I don't know. Oklahoma State, 9-12, 1-7. That's a big job. They expect big results. They fired coaches for a whole lot less than that. All right, DePaul's already open, 3-18, 0-10. Give me your 5 names, DePaul. Actually, I'll bring you 5 names next week, and I guarantee they'll be better than the 5 you're talking to right now. All right. Villanova, I'm going to throw that out there. Surprised. Everybody say, oh, my God, no. They jumped the shark on that, and they might know it by now. That's all I'm going to say. 11-10, 4-6 in the Big East, and they're nowhere near the top, nowhere near Jay Wright standards, and I think they know they jumped the shark there. The chances are not that he goes, but if I was people down in Philly, I'd keep an eye out. Can't lose to St. Joe's, LaSalle, and all those other people down there when you're Villanova and you're a vaunted top 25 program. Michigan, 7-14, 2-8. That's what I'm talking about, a big job. Who takes Michigan? Who goes into that job? The guy from Toledo goes in. Then Toledo's open. Then Toledo fills it with the guy from Wilmington, UNC Wilmington. UNC Wilmington's open. That's the type that job can bring. Michigan also, knowing them, they're going to have a tough time finding somebody really, really good for that job because they have fallen a little bit now and they can't get up. I'm going to give you one that people might not see because they've had their really, really good recruiting experience last year. They signed the 2 and 3 best player in the country. But something tells me in Piscataway down in Rutgers, there's a lot of mumbling going on. And that to get to those 2 players, I'm not sure that that's going to go down that way. I'm going to keep an eye on Rutgers' situation there. They're very close to last place in the Big Ten. And 10-10, 2-7, not doing good. The guy Holtzman at Ohio State got a vote of confidence from his athletic director. That means you're one step from the door. When your athletic director gives you a vote of confidence and says, oh, no, we have full confidence in the coach, that means you're in trouble. I know that doesn't sound right, but that's AD speak for we're going to get him after the season. So I think Holtzman at Ohio State, I think he's done a good job there. I'd be surprised if they fired him, but I would not be surprised either. Northeastern, Billy Cohen, he's been there a long time. I could see him possibly saying that's enough, 8-13, 3-15. Old Dominion, with Jeff Jones's health, will that return? They have an interim right now, Kieran Donahue. Not sure how that will go. They're DFL, so it's not going well. Detroit Mercy, 0-22. Mike Davis almost won the national title when he was the coach at Indiana. Now he's 0-22 and DFL, and I would imagine that he's a pretty close step. Brown, 5-14, 1-3 in the Ivy Leagues, DFL. But in the Ivy Leagues, you have to ask yourself, do they really care? Dartmouth, right there, 5-12, 1-3. They're TDFL, which is tied for dead freaking last. Siena, 3-17, 2-7. You might see some change there. USC, Andy Enfield, I don't know. Vanderbilt with Stack, I think that's going to be trouble. And then Missouri's 8-13, 0-8. They're DFL. I don't know who's coaching over there right now offhand, but that could be problematic. Pete, another great week. We were back in the zone, and we'll see you next week. Hope everybody has a great one, and stay well out there.